Hey there, welcome back to Story Slices, where we slice through the best Reddit tales just for you. Let's dive right into the first story. The first one is the Tittle story, and it starts like this. I never thought I'd have to defend my own property against an entitled stranger, but that's exactly what happened last summer at my farmhouse. What started as a relaxing getaway turned into a bizarre confrontation that still has me shaking my head in disbelief. My name's Jack, and I inherited an old farmhouse from my grandparents about 5 years ago. It's a beautiful 19th century home situated on 50 acres of pristine countryside, about 2 hours outside the city. Rolling hills, forests, a babbling creek, it's an absolute slice of heaven. I spent summers there as a kid and have wonderful memories of exploring the woods, fishing in the pond, and helping my grandpa tend to his small orchard. When my grandmother passed away a few years after my grandfather, she left the property to me in her will. I was touched beyond words. I knew how much that place meant to her and my grandpa. They'd owned it for over 50 years. At first I wasn't sure what to do with it. Part of me thought about selling, since I lived and worked in the city. But I just couldn't bring myself to let it go. There were too many special memories tied to that land. So I decided to keep it as a weekend getaway spot and someday retirement home. I spent the first couple years fixing it up, repairing the roof, updating the plumbing and electrical, that sort of thing. It needed a lot of TLC after being vacant for a while. But slowly I got it back into good shape. I also had the property lines officially surveyed and marked, since the original boundaries were a bit vague. Once the major work was done, I started spending long weekends and holidays there whenever I could get away from my job in the city. It was the perfect escape from the stress and noise of urban life. I'd invite friends up sometimes, but mostly I enjoyed the solitude. Just me, nature, and the simple country life my grandparents had loved so much. That particular weekend in July started off like any other. I drove up Friday evening after work, stopped in town for groceries, and settled in for a quiet night on the porch with a good book. Saturday morning, I got up early to do some yard work and check on the fruit trees in the old orchard. It was a gorgeous summer day, clear blue skies, a light breeze, birds singing in the trees. I spent a few hours pruning branches and pulling weeds, enjoying the fresh air and sunshine. Around lunchtime, I decided to take a break and cool off with a swim in the pond. I was just toweling off afterward when I heard the sound of tires on gravel coming up the long driveway. That was unusual. I rarely got visitors out here, especially unexpected ones. Curious, I threw on a t-shirt and walked around to the front of the house to see who it was. A shiny SUV I didn't recognize was parked in front of the house. As I approached, a middle-aged woman with an expensive-looking haircut got out, followed by two teenage girls. They were all dressed like they were headed to a country club, pastel polo shirts, white capri pants, designer sunglasses. Clearly not locals. "Can I help you?" I called out as I walked up. The woman turned and gave me an appraising look, taking in my ragged work clothes and bare feet. Her expression suggested she wasn't impressed. "Yes, we're here to use the pond," she said briskly. "The girls want to go swimming." I blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry, but this is private property. The pond isn't open to the public." She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be silly. We were told by the man at the gas station that there's a lovely swimming hole just past the Miller farm. This must be it." "There's been a misunderstanding," I explained. "This isn't the Miller farm. That's about a mile down the road. This is my private residence." The woman, who I'd soon learn was named Karen, narrowed her eyes. "Well, I don't see any no trespassing signs, and that pond looks plenty big enough to share." She turned to her daughters. "Come on, girls, let's go get our towels." I stepped in front of her. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Like I said, this is private property." "You're trespassing." Karen's face flushed red. "How dare you? We drove all this way. The girls were promised a swim and that's what they'll get. Now step aside. You don't own nature, you know. That pond belongs to everyone." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Actually, I do own it. The pond is entirely on my land. I'm happy to give you directions to the public beach at the state park, but you need to leave." "Now?" "Well, I've never." Karen huffed indignantly. "Do you know who I am? My husband is a very important lawyer. We'll see about this so-called private property. Girls, go ahead to the pond. This man won't give us any more trouble." She glared at me challengingly. I stood my ground. "I'm calling the police if you take one more step. This is your final warning to leave peacefully." Karen's eyes widened in outrage. She jabbed a manicured finger in my face. "How dare you threaten me? I'll have you know my brother-in-law is the sheriff. You'll be the one in trouble when I report this." I pulled out my cell phone. "Okay, that's it. I'm calling now." "Wait," Karen's teenage daughter spoke up, looking mortified. "Mom, let's just go. This is embarrassing." "Yeah," the other girl chimed in. "We can swim somewhere else." "Sorry, mister," she added, giving me an apologetic look. Karen whirled on her daughters. "Absolutely not. I won't stand for this treatment. We have every right to be here." I started dialing. Karen's face went from red to purple. Fine," she screeched. "We're leaving. But this isn't over. I'll be back with my husband, and we'll see who really owns this place." She stormed back to the SUV, practically shoving her daughters inside. As she peeled out down the driveway in a cloud of dust, I could see her still yelling and gesticulating wildly. I shook my head in disbelief. What on earth had just happened? I'd encountered hikers who accidentally strayed onto the property before, but they'd always been polite and left immediately when I explained. I'd never dealt with someone so entitled and aggressive. I tried to put the incident out of my mind and enjoy the rest of my Saturday, but I had a feeling it wasn't over. Karen didn't seem like the type to let things go easily. I wondered if I should call the police anyway to report the trespassing, just to have it on record. In the end, I decided to wait and see if she actually came back before escalating things. Sunday passed uneventfully. I did some more work around the property and started packing up to head back to the city. As I was loading up my car that evening, I saw headlights coming up the drive again. My stomach sank. She was back. This time, it was a large pickup truck. It pulled up next to my car and a heavyset man in his 50s got out, along with Karen. She had a smug, triumphant look on her face. "See, honey, I told you," she crowed. "This is the man who tried to keep us off public land yesterday. Now you can set him straight." The man approached me with a stern expression. "Sir, my wife tells me you prevented her from accessing the pond on this property yesterday. Is that correct?" I nodded. "Yes, because this is my private home and land." I explained that to her multiple times, but she refused to leave until I threatened to call the police. He puffed out his chest. "Well, I'm Karen's husband, Robert Jameson. I'm an attorney, and I can assure you that bodies of water like ponds are considered public domain. You have no right to restrict access." I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. "With all due respect, Mr. Jameson, that's not correct. This pond is entirely contained within the boundaries of my private property. I have the deed and survey to prove it. You're both trespassing right now, and I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Robert's face reddened. "Now, see here. I've been practicing law for 30 years. I think I know a thing or two about property rights. You can't just claim ownership of natural resources." "Actually, I can," I replied calmly, "and I have the legal documents to back it up. Would you like to see them?" Karen interrupted. "Oh, please, some papers don't mean anything. This is clearly public land. Just look at how big it is. You're just being selfish, trying to keep it all to yourself." I took a deep breath. "Look, I've been more than patient, but you're trespassing on my property for the second time now. I'm calling the police." I pulled out my phone. Robert held up his hands. "Now hold on. There's no need for that. Let's discuss this reasonably. Perhaps we can come to some kind of arrangement for limited access to the pond." I shook my head firmly. "There's nothing to discuss. This is my private home, not a public park. I'm not interested in any arrangements. Please leave now or I'm making the call." Karen stamped her foot like a child. "This is ridiculous. Robert, do something." Robert looked uncertain. Well, perhaps we should see those documents you mentioned, just to be sure." "Fine," I said. "Wait here." I went inside and grabbed the folder with all the property paperwork, deed, surveys, tax records, everything. When I came back out, I handed it to Robert. He paged through the documents, his frown deepening. Karen peered over his shoulder impatiently. "Well?" she demanded. "What does it say?" Robert cleared his throat uncomfortably. It appears the gentleman is correct. The pond and surrounding acreage are indeed his private property." Karen's jaw dropped. "What? That's impossible. You said?" "I know what I said." Robert cut her off. "But these documents are quite clear. We made a mistake, dear. We need to go." Karen's face contorted in fury. "No, I won't accept this. There must be some loophole, some way around it. What kind of lawyer are you?" Robert's complexion went from red to purple. "That's enough, Karen. We were wrong and we're leaving. Now?" He turned to me, looking deeply embarrassed. "I apologize for the misunderstanding, sir. It won't happen again." I nodded curtly. "See that it doesn't? Good night." Robert had to practically drag Karen back to the truck. I could hear her shrill voice berating him as they drove away. I breathed a sigh of relief, hoping that would finally be the end of it. I should have known better. The next weekend, I arrived at the farmhouse Friday evening to find several cars parked along the road near my driveway. As I pulled up to the house, I was shocked to see about a dozen people splashing around in my pond. I stormed down to the water's edge. "Hey, what do you think you're doing? This is private property." A few people looked up in surprise, but most ignored me and kept swimming. Then I spotted a familiar face, Karen. She was lounging in a beach chair, sipping a cocktail. She smirked when she saw me. "Well, if it isn't Mr. Selfish himself, come to join the party?" I was furious. "What the hell is going on here? I told you this is private property. You're all trespassing." Karen waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, please. I did some asking around town. Turns out this pond has been a local swimming hole for decades. You can't just come in and claim it as your own. It belongs to the community." I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm. "That's not how it works. My grandparents owned this land for over 50 years. Just because they were kind enough to let some locals swim occasionally doesn't negate private property rights. Now everyone needs to leave immediately." Or what? Karen challenged. "You'll call the police again? Go ahead. I've already spoken to the sheriff. He agrees you can't keep people out of a traditional community space." My blood was boiling. "Oh really? Well, how about I call him right now and we can clear this up?" I pulled out my phone and dialed the sheriff's office. To my shock, the deputy who answered seemed to back up Karen's story. He said there had been complaints about me restricting access to a public pond, and suggested I allow limited swimming to keep the peace. I was stunned. How had Karen managed to twist things around like this? I hung up, my mind racing. I needed to put a stop to this before it got even more out of hand. "All right, everyone out of the water now," I shouted. "I'm going to start taking photos and recording names. Anyone still here in 5 minutes will be charged with criminal trespassing." That got people's attention. Most started scrambling out of the pond and gathering their things. Karen stood up, looking livid. "You can't do this," she screeched. "We have a right to be here." I ignored her and started snapping photos with my phone. Within a few minutes, the crowd had dissipated, leaving just Karen and me. She jabbed a finger at my chest. "This isn't over. The community won't stand for your selfishness. You'll see?" I watched her storm off to her car, my mind already formulating a plan. This had gone too far. It was time to take serious action. First thing Monday morning, I called into work and took a personal day. Then I drove straight to the courthouse in town. I spent hours poring over property records, researching local laws, and gathering every shred of evidence I could to prove my ownership rights. Next, I paid a visit to a real estate lawyer to review everything. He confirmed that my case was rock solid. The pond and all surrounding land were 100% my private property. He drew up some official cease and desist letters to send to Karen, the sheriff's office, and the town council. I also filed for a restraining order against Karen specifically. Given her repeated trespassing and harassment, the judge granted it easily. She was now legally barred from coming within 1,000 feet of my property. My next stop was a fencing company. I arranged to have the entire perimeter of my land fenced off, with plenty of no trespassing signs posted. It was a big expense, but worth it for peace of mind. Finally, I set up a meeting with the sheriff himself. Armed with all my documentation, I laid out the facts. He was chagrined to learn how his deputy had mishandled the situation. He assured me they would respect my property rights going forward and deal with any future trespassers appropriately. It took a couple weeks, but soon my new security measures were all in place. The property was fully fenced with clear signage. I had copies of all legal documents stored safely. Video cameras monitored the driveway and pond area. I felt ready for whatever Karen might try next. I didn't have to wait long. The following weekend, I was once again relaxing at the farmhouse when I heard vehicles approaching. I checked the security camera feed on my phone. Sure enough, it was Karen leading another group of cars up to the gate. I watched on the cameras as Karen got out and tried to open the gate. Finding it securely locked, she started yelling and shaking it. Several other people joined her, looking uncertain. I sighed and headed out to confront them. As I approached the gate, Karen's eyes locked onto me with pure hatred. "You," she snarled. "How dare you fence off our community pond? Open this gate right now." I stood calmly on my side of the fence. "Karen, you are currently in violation of a restraining order. You need to leave immediately or I'm calling the sheriff to have you arrested." Her eyes widened in shock. "Restraining order? What are you talking about?" "The one I filed last week," I replied. "You've been legally barred from coming near my property due to your repeated trespassing and harassment. Now please go before this gets worse for you." Karen turned to the group behind her. "Can you believe this? He's making up lies now. We can't let him get away with this." To my relief, most of the group was already heading back to their cars. They clearly wanted no part of this confrontation. Soon it was just Karen and one other woman remaining. "Think carefully about your next move," I warned Karen. "The sheriff is on speed dial and my cameras are recording everything. You're already breaking the law by being here." The woman with Karen tugged on her arm. "Come on, let's go. This isn't worth getting arrested over." For a moment, I thought Karen might explode with rage. Her face was bright red, and she was practically vibrating with anger. But finally, she let out a wordless shriek of frustration and stomped back to her car. As she peeled away in a cloud of dust, I breathed a sigh of relief. Hopefully now she'd finally gotten the message. To my great relief, that turned out to be the last I saw of Karen. Word must have gotten around about the restraining order and my new security measures. No one else tried to access the pond without permission after that. I did get a few polite inquiries from longtime locals about swimming access. For those who approached respectfully, I was happy to allow limited use with signed liability waivers. But the days of it being treated like public property were over. In the end, I was glad I stood my ground. The farmhouse is my private home and sanctuary. Everyone deserves to feel safe and have their property rights respected. Karen's entitlement doesn't trump the law, no matter how much she wishes it did. These days, I enjoy my weekends at the farmhouse in peace. The pond is quiet and serene once again. Sometimes I think back on the whole ridiculous saga and shake my head in disbelief. But mostly, I'm just grateful for the little slice of heaven my grandparents left me, and my right to enjoy it as I see fit. Update. The dust had barely settled from Karen's dramatic exit when I realized this saga was far from over. The very next day, I received a call from the local newspaper. Apparently, Karen had contacted them with claims of a local landowner denying public access to a beloved community pond. The reporter wanted my side of the story. I took a deep breath and calmly explained the situation, providing copies of my property documents and the restraining order against Karen. To my relief, the reporter seemed to understand the real story. When the article came out a few days later, it was a fair and accurate account that made it clear the pond was, in fact, on private property. But Karen wasn't done yet. A week later, I got wind that she was organizing a protest. Sure enough, that Saturday morning, I woke up to find a small group of people gathered at the end of my driveway, holding signs with slogans like "Free the Pond" and "Nature belongs to everyone." I sighed and picked up the phone to call the sheriff. Within 20 minutes, a patrol car pulled up. The deputy spoke with the protesters, explaining that they were welcome to demonstrate peacefully on public land, but they couldn't block my driveway or enter my property. Most of the group grumbled but complied, moving down to the roadside. Karen, unsurprisingly, threw a fit. I watched from my porch as she yelled at the deputy, gesticulating wildly. Eventually, her refusal to move led to her being escorted into the patrol car. As the deputy drove off with Karen in the back seat, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and frustration. How had this gotten so out of hand? The next few weeks were tense. The protesters dwindled in number but didn't disappear entirely. I started getting nasty looks when I went into town for groceries. It seemed Karen had been busy spreading her version of events. I decided it was time to take control of the narrative. I reached out to the newspaper again and offered an interview. This time, I gave them a tour of the property, showing them the history of the place and explaining my family's connection to it. I also shared my side of the story in detail, from Karen's initial trespass to her increasingly aggressive behavior. I made it clear that I wasn't against sharing the pond entirely. I simply wanted to protect my property rights and ensure the safety of anyone using it. The resulting article was even better than I'd hoped. It painted a sympathetic picture of a grandson trying to preserve his family's legacy while dealing with unreasonable demands from entitled outsiders. The tide of public opinion began to shift. A few days after the article came out, I received a surprising visitor, the mayor of our small town. He apologized for the trouble and offered to help mediate the situation. "Look," he said, sitting on my porch with a glass of lemonade, "I understand this is your private property, but this pond has been used by locals for generations. Is there any way we can find a middle ground?" I thought for a moment. "I'm not opposed to allowing some public use," I said, "but it needs to be on my terms. I can't have people showing up whenever they want, leaving trash, and treating the place like a public park." The mayor nodded. "That's completely fair. What if we set up a reservation system? People could apply for permits to use the pond on specific days. We could limit the number of visitors and make sure everyone understands the rules." It wasn't a perfect solution, but it seemed like a reasonable compromise. We spent the next hour hammering out the details. The town would handle the permit process and provide insurance coverage. In exchange, I would allow a limited number of visitors on weekends during the summer months. We also agreed on a set of strict rules: no alcohol, no loud music, all trash must be removed, and absolutely no unauthorized entry to the rest of the property. Any violations would result in immediate revocation of pond privileges. With a plan in place, the mayor called a town meeting to explain the new system. To my surprise, most people seemed satisfied with the compromise. There were a few grumbles, but overall the response was positive. Karen, of course, was livid. She stood up during the meeting and started ranting about how I was holding the pond hostage and extorting the town. The mayor quickly shut her down, reminding everyone that this was a voluntary agreement on my part to allow any access at all to my private property. As Karen stormed out of the meeting, I caught the eye of her husband, Robert. He gave me an apologetic shrug before hurrying after his wife. I almost felt sorry for him. The new system went into effect the following summer. There were a few hiccups at first, but overall, it worked well. The limited number of permits kept the pond from getting overcrowded, and the rules ensured that visitors respected the property. To my surprise, I found myself enjoying the controlled visits. It was nice to see families making memories at the pond, just as I had done as a child. And because everyone had to register for a permit, there was a sense of accountability that prevented the kind of entitled behavior Karen had displayed. Speaking of Karen, she didn't give up easily. Over the next year, she made several attempts to circumvent the system. She tried using fake names to get permits, sent friends to sneak her in, and even attempted to rally support for a lawsuit against me. None of it worked. The permit system was well documented, and her previous behavior had soured many people on her cause. The lawsuit threat fizzled out when no reputable lawyer would take the case. The final straw came when Karen was caught trying to cut through my fence one night. The security cameras caught her in the act, and this time the sheriff wasn't so lenient. She was arrested for trespassing and violating the restraining order. After that incident, Karen and her family abruptly moved away. I heard through the grapevine that the embarrassment had become too much for them to handle in our small community. With Karen gone, things settled into a peaceful routine. The permit system continued to work well, and I found a balance between preserving my privacy and sharing the natural beauty of the property. Looking back, I'm glad I stood my ground. It would have been easier to give in to Karen's demands or sell the property to avoid the hassle, but this land meant too much to me to let it go without a fight. Now, as I sit on the porch my grandfather built, watching the sunset reflect off the pond, I feel a deep sense of satisfaction. This place is still my private sanctuary, but it's also become a source of joy for others in a controlled, respectful way. I think my grandparents would be proud of how things turned out. Their legacy lives on, not just in the land itself, but in the way it brings the community together while still remaining our family's special place. As for Karen, wherever she ended up, I hope she learned something from all this. But somehow, I doubt it. Some people never change. Me? I'm just happy to enjoy my little slice of heaven, secure in the knowledge that I protected what's mine while still finding a way to share it with others who appreciate it. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.